Okay. Everything seems to be going this end. Twitch still has me listed as unstable. I don't know why I would be unstable. As I am using a mostly wired connection. Okay. Trying to see if Change Network says anything. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. Okay, that's extremely awkward. Both my in-home networks are telling me that there's no internet. I will try one more. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. My family has the mama. Listen to the radio. I want to remember we built this city. We built. Did it start over again? Okay, am I connected? Twitch still says I have an unstable connection. Try one more thing. Okay, well. Still shows me connected. It shows me that I have a fairly high bit rate. It shows me that I'm getting good frames per second. So I don't know what the issue is. Did I not say that this was for the fairies? That's what I don't know. Saying that. Maybe that's a problem. By all means, leave some cream out and maybe butter for the fairies tonight. Come on. Ah, Twitch says I have excellent connection. Took long enough. So, anyone here in chat that can hear me because the ads are so on? Would you want me to reread the first story? Anyone? No, that's just fun. Okay, I didn't realize that the trivia Kel put up was trivia and political trivia. But welcome back, everyone. Sorry for the technical issues. I have no idea what was happening, other than fairy antics, most likely. But I posed a question. Would you want me to reread the first story so it doesn't sound like shit? I may do it anyway. What do you think? I may put the Swearwolf logo in here too. Seems appropriate. So, should I reread the first story? Yes, no, maybe so. I don't want to check to see how many viewers I have. I'll just redo it anyway. And even if it doesn't bother everyone else, it will bother me. I have to check the library sound again to make sure I'm not getting ads. Okay. So, first story of the evening, take 2. I don't want to see my stats down there. I don't guess anyone else wants to see them too. Vanish? Vanish from my screen. Okay. So our first story for this Friday night fairy tale reading: The 6 Hungry Beasts. Once upon a time there lived a man who dwelt with his wife in a little hut, far away from any neighbors. But they did not mind being alone, and would have been quite happy if it had only not been for Martin, who came every night to steal their poultry. I know 2 Martin streamers. Maybe I should have mentioned the story to them. No. The man laid all sorts of traps to catch the thief, but instead of capturing the foe, it happened that one day he got caught himself, and falling down, struck his head against a stone and was killed. Not long after, the marten came back to look out for his supper, and seeing the dead man lying there, he said to himself, "What a prize! This time I've really done well." And dragging the body with great difficulty to the sled, which he was waiting for him, drove off with his booty. He had not driven far when he met a squirrel, who bowed and said, "Good morning, godfather. What have you got behind you?" The marten laughed and answered, "Did you ever hear anything so strange? The old man you see here was setting traps about his henhouse, thinking he could catch me. But he fell into his own trap and broke his neck. He is very heavy. I wish you would help me to draw the sled." The squirrel did as he was asked, and the sled moved slowly along. By and by a hare came running across the field, but stopped to see what wonderful thing was coming. "What have you got there?" she asked, and the marten told his story and begged the hare to help him pull. The hare pulled her hardest, and after a while they were joined by a fox, then by a wolf, and at length by a bear. And that was added to the company, and he was of more use than all the other 5 beasts put together. Besides, when the whole 6 had supped off the man, he was not so heavy to draw. The worst of it was that they soon began to get hungry again, and the wolf, who was the hungriest of all, said to the rest, "What shall we eat now, my friends, as there is no more man?" "I suppose we shall have to eat the smallest of us," replied the bear, and the marten turned around to seize the squirrel, who was much smaller than any of the rest of them. But the squirrel ran up a tree like lightning, and the marten remembered, just in time, that he was next in size, and slipped quick as a thought into a hole in the rocks. "What shall we eat now?" asked the wolf again, when he had recovered from his surprise. "We must eat the smallest of us," repeated the bear, stretching out his paw towards the hare. But the hare was not a hare for nothing, and before the paw had touched her, she had darted deep into the wood. Now that the squirrel, the marten, and the hare had all gone, the fox was the smallest of the three who were left, and the wolf and the bear explained that they were very sorry, but they would have to eat him. Michael, the fox, did not run away as the others had done, but smiled in a friendly manner and remarked, "Things taste so stale in the valley. One's appetite is so much better on the mountain." The wolf and the bear agreed, and they chose a path that led up the mountain. The fox trotted cheerfully by his two big companions, but on the way he managed to whisper to the wolf, "Tell me, Peter, when I'm eaten, what will you have for your next supper?" This simple question seemed to put off the wolf very much. What would they have for their next dinner? And what was more important, who would be there to eat it? They had made a rule always to dine off the smallest of the party, and when the fox was gone, why, of course, he was smaller than the bear. These thoughts quickly flashed through his head, and he said hastily, "Dear brothers, would it not be better for us to live together as comrades, and everyone to hunt for a common dinner? It is not my good plan, is it?" "It is the best thing I've ever dang it. "It's the best thing that I've ever heard," answered the fox, and as they were 2-1, the bear had to be content, though in his heart he would much have preferred a good dinner at once to any friendship. For a few days all went well. There was plenty of game in the forest, and even the wolf had as much to eat as he could wish. One morning the fox, as usual, was going about his rounds when he noticed a tall, slender tree with a magpie's nest in one of the top branches. Now the fox was particularly fond of young magpies, and he set about making a plan by which he could have one for dinner. At last he hit upon something which he thought would do, and accordingly he sat down near the tree and began to stare hard at it.
What are you looking at, Michael?"
asked the magpie, who was watching him from a bough. "I'm looking at this tree. It has just struck me what a good tree it would be to cut down for my new snowshoes." But the answer of the magpie screeched loudly and exclaimed,
"Oh, not this tree, dear brother, I implore you. I've built my nest on it, and my young ones are not yet old enough to fly."
"It will not be easy to find another tree that would make such good snowshoes," answered the fox, cocking his head to one side and gazing at the tree thoughtfully. "But I do not like to be ill-natured, so if you would give me one of your young ones, I will seek my snowshoes elsewhere." Not knowing what to do, the poor magpie had to agree, and flying back with a heavy heart, he threw one of his young ones out of the nest. The fox seized it in its mouth and ran off in triumph, while the magpie, though deeply grieved at the loss of his little one, found some comfort in the thought that only a bird of extraordinary wisdom would have dreamed of saving the rest by the sacrifice of the one. But what do you think happened? Why, a few days later, Michael the fox might have been seen sitting under the same tree. A dreadful pang shot through the heart of the magpie as he peeped at him from the hole in his nest.
"What are you looking at?"
he asked in a trembling voice. At this tree. I was just thinking what good snowshoes it would make, answered the fox, in an absent voice, as if he was not thinking of what he was saying.
"Oh, my brother, my dear little brother, don't do that!"
cried the magpie, hopping about in anguish.
"You don't know, you only promised a few days ago you would get your snowshoes somewhere else."
So I did, but though I searched through the whole forest, there's not a single tree that is good as this. I'm very sorry to put you out, but really it's not my fault. The only thing I can do for you is to offer to give up my snowshoes altogether, if you will throw me down one of your young ones in exchange. And the poor magpie, in spite of his wisdom, was obliged to throw another of his little ones out of the nest. And this time he was not able to console himself for the thought that he had been much cleverer than other people. He sat on the edge of his nest, his head drooping and his feathers all ruffled, looking the very picture of misery. Indeed, he was so different from the gay, jaunty magpie whom every creature in the forest knew, that a crow who was flying past stopped to inquire what was the matter.
Where are the two young ones who are not in the nest?"
asked he.
"I had to give them to the fox,"
replied the magpie in a quivering voice.
"He has been here twice in the week and wanted to cut down my tree for the purpose of making snowshoes out of it, and the only way I could buy him off was by giving him two of my young ones." "Oh, you fool!"
cried the crow.
"The fox is only trying to frighten you. He could not have cut down the tree, for he has neither an axe nor a knife." "Oh, dear me, to think you have sacrificed your young ones for nothing. Dear, dear, how could you be so very foolish?"
And the crow flew away, leaving the magpie overcome with shame and sorrow. The next morning the fox came to his usual place in front of the tree, for he was again hungry, and a nice young magpie would have suited him very well for dinner. But this time there was no cowering, timid magpie to do his bidding, but a bird with his head erect and a determined voice.
"My good fox,"
said the magpie, putting his head on one side and looking very wise.
"My good fox, if you take my advice, you will go home as fast as you can. There's no use your talking about making snowshoes out of this tree, when you have neither knife nor axe to cut it down."
"Who has been teaching you wisdom?" asked the fox, forgetting his manners at his surprise at this new turn of affairs.
"The crow who paid me a visit yesterday,"
answered the magpie. "A crow, was it?" said the fox. "Well, the crow had better not meet me for the future, or it may be the worse for him." As Michael, the cunning beast, had no desire to continue this conversation, he left the forest. But when he came to a high road, he laid himself at full length on the ground, stretching himself out just as if he were dead. Very soon he noticed, out of the corner of his eye, that the crow was flying towards him, and he kept stiller and stiffer than ever, with his tongue hanging out of his mouth. The crow, who wanted his supper very badly, quickly hopped towards him, stooping forward to peck at his tongue, when the fox gave a snap and caught him by the wing. The crow knew that it was no use to struggle, so he said,
"Ah, brother, if you're really going to eat me, do it, I beg you, in good style. Throw me first over the precipice, so that my feathers may be strewn here and there, and that all will see your cunning is greater than mine."
This idea pleased the fox, for he had not yet forgiven the crow for depriving him of the young magpies. So he carried the crow to the edge of the precipice and threw him over, intending to go round by the path he knew and pick him up at the bottom. But no sooner had the fox let the crow go than he soared up into the air, and hovering just out of reach of his enemy's claws, he cried with a laugh,
"Oh, fox, you know well how to catch, but you cannot keep."
With his tail between his legs, the fox slunk back into the forest. He did not know where to look for dinner, as he guessed that the crow would have flown back before him and put everyone on their guard. The notion of going to bed supperless was very unpleasant to him, and he was wondering what in the world he should do when he chanced to meet his old friend the bear. This poor animal had just lost his wife and was going to get someone to mourn over her, for he felt her loss greatly. He had hardly left his comfortable cave when he had come across the wolf, who had inquired where he was going. "I'm going to find a mourner," answered the bear, and told his story. "Oh, let me mourn for you," cried the wolf. "Do you understand how to howl?" "Oh, certainly, certainly, grandfather," replied the wolf. But the bear said he should like to have a specimen of his howling to make sure that he knew his business. So the wolf broke forth in his song of lament. "Hoo, hoo, hoo, hum, hoo!" He shouted, but he made such a noise that the bear put his paws to his ears and begged him to stop. "You have no idea how it is done. Be off with you," he said angrily. A little further down the road, the hare was resting in a ditch, but when she saw the bear, she came out to spoke to him and inquired why he looked so sad. The bear told her of the loss of his wife and his search after a mourner who could lament over her in the proper style. The hare instantly offered her services, but the bear took care to ask her to give him proof of her talents before he accepted. "Poo, poo, poo, pum, poo," piped the hare, but this time her voice was so small the bear could hardly hear her. "That is not what I want," he said. "I will bid you good morning." It was after this that the fox came up, and he was also struck with the bear's altered looks and stopped. "What's the matter with you, godfather?" he said. "And where are you going?" "I'm going to find a mourner for my wife," answered the bear. "Oh, do choose me," cried the fox. The bear looked at him thoughtfully. "Can you howl well?" he said. "Yes, beautifully. Just listen." And the fox lifted up his voice and sang, weeping, "Loo, loo, loo, the famous spinner, the beggar of good cakes, the prudent housekeeper is torn from her husband. Loo, 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 she is gone, she is gone." "Now at last I have found someone who knows the art of lamentation," exclaimed the bear, quite delighted, and he led the fox back to his cave and bade him begin his lament over the wife, who was lying stretched out on a bed of gray moss. But this did not suit the fox at all. "One cannot wail properly in this cave," he said. "It is much too damp. You had better take her body to the storehouse. It will sound much finer there." So the bear carried his wife's body to the storehouse, while he himself went back to the cave to cook some pap for the mourner. From time to time he paused and listened for the sound of wailing, but he heard nothing. At last he went to the door of the storehouse and called to the fox. "Why don't you howl, godfather? What are you about?" And the fox, who, instead of weeping over the dead bear, had quietly been eating her, answered, "There's only remain her legs and the soles of her feet. Give me 5 more minutes and they will be gone also." When the bear heard that, he ran back for a kitchen ladle to give the traitor the beating he deserved. But as he opened the door of the storehouse, Michael was ready for him, and slipping between his legs, dashed straight off into the forest. The bear, seeing the traitor had escaped, flung the ladle after him, and it just caught the tip of his tail. And that is why there comes to be a white spot on the tips of the tails of all foxes. Okay, now getting to the second story officially. Let me check the silence here. Okay, so that's How the Beggar Boy Turned into Count Piro. Once upon a time there lived a man who had only one son, a lazy, stupid boy who would never do anything he was told. When the father was dying, he sent for his son and told him that he should soon be left alone in the world, with no possessions but a small cottage they lived in, and a pear tree which grew behind it, and that, whether he liked it or not, he would have to work, or else he would starve. Then the old man died. But the boy did not work. Instead, he idled about as before, contenting himself with the pears off his tree, which, unlike other pear trees before or since, bore fruit the whole year round. Indeed, the pears were so much finer than any you could even get in the autumn, that one day, in the middle of winter, they attracted the notice of a fox who was creeping by. "Dear me, what lovely pears," he said to the youth. "Do give me a basket of them. It will bring you luck." "Ah, little fox, but if I give you a basketful, what am I to eat?" asked the boy. "Oh, trust me and do what I tell you," said the fox. "I know it will bring you luck." So the boy got up and picked some of the ripest pears and put them into a rush basket. The fox thanked him, and taking a basket in his mouth, trotted off to the king's palace and made his way straight to the king. "Your Majesty, my master sends you a few of his best pears and begs you will graciously accept them," he said, laying the basket at the feet of the king. "Pears? At this season?" cried the king, peering down at them. "And pray, who is your master?" "The Count Piro," answered the fox. "But how does he manage to get pears in midwinter?" asked the king. "Oh, he has everything he wants," replied the fox. "He is richer even than you are, your Majesty." "Then what can I send him in return for his pears?" said the king. "Nothing, your Majesty, or you would hurt his feelings," answered the fox. "Well, tell him how heartily I thank him, and how much I shall enjoy them." And the fox went away. He trotted back to the cottage with his empty basket and told his tale. But the youth did not seem pleased to hear it, as the fox was to tell. "But, my dear little fox," he said, "you've brought me nothing in return, and I'm so hungry." "Let me alone," said the fox. "I know what I'm doing, and you will see. It will bring you luck." A few days after this, the fox came back again. "I must have another basket of pears," he said. "Ah, little fox, what shall I eat if you take away all my pears?" answered the youth. "Be quiet, it will be all right," said the fox, and taking a bigger basket than before, he filled it quite full of pears. Then he picked it up with his mouth and trotted off to the palace. "Your Majesty, as you seem to like the first basket of pears, I have brought you some more," he said, "with my master, the Count Piro's humble respects." "Now, surely it is not possible to grow such pears in deep snow on the ground," cried the king. "Oh, that never affects him," answered the fox lightly. "He is rich enough to do anything, but today he sends me to ask you if you will give him your daughter in marriage." "If he is so much richer than I am," said the king, I shall be obliged to refuse. My honor would not permit me to accept his offer." "Oh, your Majesty, you must not think that," replied the fox. "And do not let the question of a dowry trouble you. The Count Piro would not dream of asking anything but the hand of your princess." "Is he really so rich that he can do without a dowry?" asked the king. did I not tell your majesty that he was richer than you? Answered the fox reproachfully.
Well, beg him to come here, that we may talk together, said the king.
So the fox went back to the young man and said, I have told the king that you are Count Piro, and have asked his daughter in marriage. Oh, little fox, what have you done? Cried the youth in dismay. When the king sees me, he will order my head to be cut off. Oh, no, he won't, replied the fox. Just do as I tell you. And he went off to town, stopping at the house of the best tailor. My master, Count Piro, begs you will send him at once the finest coat you have in your shop, said the fox, putting on his grandest air. And if it fits him, I will call and pay you for it tomorrow. Indeed, he is in a great hurry. Perhaps it might as well that I look around myself. The tailor was not accustomed to serve counts, and he was at once out of all coats he had ready. The fox chose a beautiful one of white and silver, and bade the tailor to tie it up in a parcel, and carrying the string in his teeth, he left the shop, and went to a horse dealer's, whom he persuaded to send his finest horse round to the cottage, saying that the king had bidden his master to the palace. Very unwillingly the young man put on the coat and mounted the horse, and rode to meet the king, with the fox rushing before him. What am I to say to his majesty, little fox? He asked anxiously. You know that I have never spoken to a king before. Say nothing, answered the fox, but leave the talking to me. Good morning, your majesty, will be all that is necessary for you. By the time they had reached the palace, the king came to the door to receive Count Piro, and led him into the great hall where a feast was spread. The princess was already seated at the table, but was as dumb as Count Piro himself. The count speaks very little.
The count speaks very little,
the king said at last to the fox, but he answered, He has so much to think about in the management of his property that he cannot possibly afford to talk to ordinary people. The king was quite satisfied, and they finished dinner, after which Count Piro and the fox took leave. The next morning the fox came round again. Give me another basket of pears, he said. Very well, little fox, but remember it may cost me my life, answered the youth. Oh, leave it to me, and do as I tell you, and you will see that in the end it will bring you luck, answered the fox, and plucking the pears, he took them up to the king. My master, Count Piro, sends you these pears, he said, and asks for an answer to his proposal.
Tell the count that the wedding can take place whenever he pleases, answered the king, filled with pride. The fox trotted back to deliver his message.
But I can't bring the princess here, little fox, cried the young man in dismay. You leave everything to me, answered the fox. Have I not managed it well so far? And up to the palace, preparations were made for a grand wedding, and the youth was married to the princess. After a week of feasting, the fox said to the king, My master wishes to take his young bride home to his own castle.
Very well, I will accompany them, replied the king, and he ordered his courtiers and attendants to get ready, and the best horses in his stable to be brought out for himself, Count Piro, and the princess. So they all set out and rode across the plain, the little fox running before them. He stopped at sight of a great flock of sheep which was feeding peacefully on the rich grass. To whom do these sheep belong to? Asked he of the shepherd. To an ogre,
replied the shepherd. Hush, said the fox in a mysterious manner. Do you see that crowd of armed men riding along? If you were to tell them that those sheep belong to an ogre, they would kill them. Then the ogre would kill you. If they ask, do you say the sheep belong to Count Piro? It will be better for everyone. Then the fox ran hastily on, as he did not wish to be seen talking to the shepherd. Very soon the king came up.
What beautiful sheep, he said, drawing up his horse. I have none so fine in my pastures. Whose are they?
Count Piro's, answered the shepherd, who did not know the king.
Well, he must be a very rich man, thought the king to himself, and rejoiced that he had such a wealthy son-in-law. Meanwhile, the fox had met with a huge herd of pigs, sniffing about the roots of some trees. "To whom do these pigs belong?" he asked the swineherd. "To the ogre," replied he. "Hush!" answered the fox, with nobody around to hear. "Do you see that troop of armed men riding towards us? If you tell them that the pigs belong to an ogre, they will kill them, and then the ogre will kill you. If they ask, just say that the pigs belong to Count Piro. It will be better for everyone." And then he ran hastily on. Soon after, the king rode up. "What fine pigs," he said, reining in his horse. "They're fatter than any I've got on my farms. Whose are they?"
"Count Piro's," answered the swineherd, who did not know the king, and again the king felt lucky to have such a rich son-in-law.
At this time the fox ran faster than before, and in such a flowery meadow he found a troop of horses feeding.
"Whose horses are these?" he asked the man who was watching them.
"An ogre's,"
But "Hush!" whispered the fox. "Do you see that crowd of armed men coming before us? If you tell them the horses belong to an ogre, they will drive them off, and then the ogre will kill you. If they ask, just say they're Count Piro's. It will be better for everyone."
And he ran off again. In a few minutes the king rode up. "Oh, what lovely creatures! How I wish they were mine!" he exclaimed. "Whose are they?"
"Count Piro's," answered the man, who did not know the king, and the king's heart leapt as he thought they belonged to his rich son-in-law. They were as good as his.
At the last the fox came to a castle of the ogre himself, and ran up the steps, with tears falling from his eyes, and crying,
"Oh, you poor, poor people, what a sad fate is yours!"
"What has happened?" asked the ogre, trembling with fright. Do you see the troop of
horsemen who are riding along the road? They are sent by the king to kill you."
"Oh, dear little fox, help us, we implore you!" cried the ogre and his wife.
"Well, I will do what I can," answered the fox. "The best place is for you to both hide in the big oven. When the soldiers have gone by, I will let you out."
The ogre and ogress scrambled into the oven as quick as thought, and the fox banged the door on them. Just as he did so, the king came up.
"Doors the honor and dismount, your majesty," said the fox, bowing low. This is a palace of Count Piro."
"Why, it is more splendid than my own!" exclaimed the king, looking around at all the beautiful things that filled the hall. "But why are there no servants?"
"His Excellency, the Count Piro, wished the princess to choose them by herself," answered the fox, and the king nodded his approval. He then rode on, leaving the bridal pair in the castle. But when it was dark and all was still, the fox crept downstairs and lit the kitchen fire, and the ogre and his wife were burned to death. The next morning the fox said to Count Piro, "Now that you are rich and happy, you have no more need of me, but before I go, there's one thing I must ask you in the future. When I die, promise me that you will give me a magnificent coffin and bury me with all due honors."
"Oh, little fox, don't talk of dying," asked the princess.
Again. "Oh, little fox, don't talk of dying," cried the princess, nearly weeping, for she had taken a great liking to the fox. After some time, the fox thought he would see if Count Piro was really grateful to him for all he had done, and went back to the castle, where he lay down on the doorstep and pretended to be dead. The princess was just going out for a walk, and directly saw him lying there, and she burst into tears and fell on her knees beside him. "My dear little fox, you are not dead," she wailed. "You poor, poor little creature, you shall have the finest coffin in the world." "A coffin for an animal," said Count Piro. "What nonsense! Just take him by the leg and throw him into the ditch."
Then the fox sprang up and cried,
"You wretched, thankless beggar! Have you forgiven all that you owe me your riches?"
Count Piro was frightened when he heard those words, for he thought that perhaps the fox might have the power to take away the castle and leave him as poor as when he had nothing to eat but the pears off his tree. So he tried to soften the fox's anger, saying that he had only spoken in joke, and he had known quite well that he was not really dead. For the sake of the princess, the fox let himself be softened, and he lived in the castle for many years and played with Count Piro's children. And when he did actually die, his coffin was made of silver, and Count Piro and his wife followed him to the grave. Did that mean they died after him, or oh? Let's see, I've got 20 minutes saved. Okay. Carrying on. My wayward son. The Rogue and the Herdsman. In a tiny cottage near the king's palace, there once lived an old man, his wife, and his son, a very lazy fellow who would never do a stroke of work. He would not even be gotten to look after the one cow, but left her to look after herself, while he lay on a bank and went to sleep in the sun. For a long time his father bore with him, hoping that he would possibly grow older and gain more sense, but at last the old man's patience was worn out, and told his son that he should not stay in the house in idleness, but must go out into the world to seek his fortune. He kicked him out. The young man saw that there was no help for it, and he set out with a wallet full of food over his shoulder. At length he came to a large house, at the door of which he knocked.
"What do you want?"
asked the old man who opened it, and the youth told him how his father had turned him out because he was lazy and stupid, and he needed shelter for the night.
"That you shall have," replied the old man. "But tomorrow I shall give you some work to do, for you must know that I am the chief herdsman of the king."
The youth made no answer to this. He felt, if he was to be made to work after all, that might as well have stayed where he was. But as he did not see any other way of getting a bed, he went in slowly. The herdsman's 2 daughters and their mother were sitting at supper, and invited him to join them. Nothing more was said about work, and when the meal was over, they all went to bed. In the morning, when the young man was dressed, the herdsman called to him and said,
"Now listen, and I will tell you what you have to do."
What is it?" asked the youth sulkily.
"Nothing less than look after 200 pigs,"
was the reply. "Oh, I'm used to that," answered the youth.
"Yes, but this time you'll have to do it properly,"
said the herdsman, and he took the youth to the place where the pigs were feeding, and told him to drive them into the woods on the side of the mountain. This the young man did, but as soon as they reached the outskirts of the mountain, they grew quite wild, and would have run away altogether had they not luckily gone towards a narrow ravine from which the youth easily drove him home to his father's cottage. "Where did all these pigs come from? And how did you get them?" asked the old man in surprise, when his son knocked at the door of the hut he had only left the day before.
"Well, they belong to the king's chief herdsman," answered the son. "He gave them to me to look after, but I knew I could not do it, so I drove them straight to you. Now make the best of your good fortune, and kill them and hang them up at once."
"What are you talking about?" cried the father, pale with horror.
"We should certainly both be put to death if I did any such thing." "No, no, do as I tell you, and I will get out of it somehow," replied the young man.
In the end, he had his way. The pigs were killed and laid side by side in a row, when he cut off the tails and tied them together with a piece of cord, and swinging the bundle over his back, he returned to the place where they should have been feeding. And here was a small swamp, which he had just what he wanted. Finding a large stone, he fastened the rope to it and sank it in the swamp, after which he arranged the tails carefully, one by one, so that only their points were seen sticking out of the water. When everything was in order, he hastened home to his master with such a sorrowful face that the herdsman saw at once that something dreadful had happened.
Where are the pigs?
He asked. Oh, don't speak of them, answered the young man. I really can hardly tell you. One moment they got into the field and became quite mad and ran in every direction. I ran too, hither and thither as fast as I caught one, and another was off, till I was in despair. At last, however, I collected all of them and was about to drive them back when suddenly they rushed down the hill into the swamp, where they vanished completely, leaving only the points of their tails, which you can see for yourself.
You have made up that story very well,
replied the herdsman. No, it is the truth. Come with me and I'll prove it. And they went together to the spot, and there, sure enough, were the points of the tails sticking up from the water. The herdsman laid hold of the nearest and pulled with all his might, but it was of no use, for the stone had held them all fast. He called to the young man to help him, but the two did not succeed any better than the one had done.
Yes, your story was all true. It is a wonderful thing, said the herdsman. But I see no fault of yours, and I must put up with my loss as well as I can. Now let us return home, for it is time for supper.
Next morning the herdsman said to the young man,
I have got some other work for you to do. Today you must take 100 sheep to graze, and be careful that no harm befalls them.
I will do my best, replied the youth, and he opened the gate of the fold where the sheep had been all night, and drove them out into the meadow. But in a short time they grew as wild as the pigs had done, and scattered in all directions. The young man could not collect them, try as he would, and he thought himself that this was the punishment for the laziness in refusing to look after his father's cow. At last, however, the sheep seemed tired of running about, and then the youth managed to gather them together, and drove them, as before, straight to his father's house.
Whose sheep are those, and what are they doing here?
Asked the old man in wonder, as his son told him. But when the tale was ended, his father shook his head.
Give up these bad ways and take them back to your master, he said.
No, no, answered the youth. I am not so stupid as that. We will kill them and have them for dinner.
You will use your life if you do, replied the father.
Oh, I'm not sure of that, said the son. But anyway, I have my will for once. And he killed all the sheep and laid them on the grass. But he cut off the head of the ram which always led the flock, and bells round its horns. He took us back to the place where they should have been feeding, for here he had noticed a high rock, with a patch of green grass in the middle, and 2 or 3 thick bushes growing round the edge. Up this rock he climbed with great difficulty, and fastened the ram's head to the bushes with a cord, leaving only the tips of the horns, with the bell was visible. There was a soft breeze blowing, and the bushes which the head was tied to moved gently, and the bells rang. When all was done to his liking, he hastened quickly back to his master.
Where are the sheep?
Asked the herdsman as the young man came panting up the steps. Oh, don't speak of them, he answered. It is only a miracle that I am here by myself.
Tell me at once what happened,
said the herdsman sternly. The youth began to sob, and stammered out, I hardly know how to tell you. They were so troublesome that I could not manage them all. They ran about in all directions, and I ran after them and nearly died of fatigue. Then I heard a noise, which I thought was the wind, but it was the sheep, which, before my eyes, were carried straight up into the air. I stood watching them as if I was turned to stone, but they kept ringing in my ears the sound of the bells on the ram which led them.
There is nothing but a lie from beginning to end, said the herdsman.
No, it is true as there is a sun in heaven, answered the young man.
Then give me reproof of it,
cried his master. Oh, come with me, said the youth. By the time it was evening and dusk was falling, the young man brought the herdsman to the foot of the great rock. It was so dark you could hardly see it. Still, the sound of the sheep bells rang softly from above, and the herdsman knew them to be those he had hung on the horns of the ram. Do you hear?
Yes, I hear. You have spoken the truth, but I cannot blame you for what has happened. I must bear the loss as best as I can.
He turned and went home, followed by the young man, who felt highly pleased with his own cleverness.
I should not be surprised if the tasks I set you were too difficult, and that you were tired of them, said the herdsman the next morning. But today I have something quite easy for you to do. You must look after 40 oxen, and be sure you are very careful, for one of them has gold tips, hooves, and horns, and the king reckons it's among his best treasures.
The young man drove the oxen out to the meadow. No sooner had they got there than, like the sheep and the pigs, they began to scamper in all directions, the precious spoil being the wildest of all. As the youth stood watching them, not knowing what to do next, it came into his head that his father's cow was put out to grass at no great distance, and he forthwith made such a noise that quite frightened the oxen, who were easily persuaded to take the path he wished. When they heard the cow lowing, they galloped out all the faster, and soon they all arrived at his father's house. The old man was standing before the door of his hut when the great herd of animals dashed round the corner of the road, and his son and his own cow at their head. "Whose cattle are these, and why are they here?" he asked, and his son told him the story. "Take them back to your master as soon as you can," said the old man, but his son only laughed and said, "No, they're a present for you. They will make you fat." For a long time, the old man refused to have anything to do with such a wicked scheme, but his son talked him over in the end, and they all killed the oxen they had had to kill the sheep and the pigs. Last of all, they came to the king's cherished ox. The son had a rope ready to cast round its horns and throw it to the ground, but the ox was stronger than the rope and soon tore it to pieces. Then it dashed away to the wood, with the youth following. Over hedges and ditches they both went, till they reached a rocky path which bordered the herdsman's land. Here the ox, thinking itself safe, stopped to rest, and thus gave the young man a chance to catch up with it. Not knowing how to catch it, he collected all the wood he could find and made a circle of fire around the ox, who by this time had fallen asleep and did not wake till the fire caught its head, and for then it was too late to escape. Then the young man, who had been watching, ran home to his master.
"You have been away a long while," said the herdsman. "Where are the cattle?"
The young man gasped and seemed as if he was unable to speak. At last he answered, "It's always the same story. The oxen are gone, gone."
"Gone!"
cried this herdsman.
"Scoundrel, you lie!"
"I'm telling the exact truth," answered the young man. "Directly we came to the meadow, they grew so wild that I could not keep them together. Then the big ox broke away, and the others followed till they all disappeared down a deep hole into the earth. It seemed to me that I heard the sounds of bellowing, and I thought I recognized the voice of the golden-horned ox. But when I got to the place from which the sounds had come, I could neither see nor hear anything in the hole itself, which there were traces of fire all around it."
"Wretch!"
cried the herdsman when he heard the story.
"Even if you did not lie before, you are lying now."
"No, master, I'm speaking the truth. Come and see for yourself."
"If I find you've deceived me, you're a dead man, and the herdsman,
and they all went together. "What do you call that?" said the youth, and the herdsman looked, and he saw the traces of the fire, which seemed to have sprung up under the earth.
"Wonder upon wonder!" he exclaimed. "You really did speak the truth after all. Well, I cannot reproach you, though I shall have to pay heavily to my royal master for the value of that ox. But come, let us go home. I will never set you to herd again. Henceforth I will give you something easier to do."
"I had the same thought and thing as you."
"I have just exactly the thing for you," said the herdsman as they walked along, "and it is so simple that you cannot make a mistake. Just to make me 10 scythes, one for every man, for I want the grass grown in every mortal. Just make me 10 scythes, one for every man, for I want the grass mown in one of the meadows tomorrow."
At these words, the youth's heart sank, for he had never been trained with either a smith or a joiner. However, he dared not say no, but smiled and nodded. Slowly and sadly he went to bed, but he could not sleep, for wondering how the scythes were to be made. All the skill and cunning he had shown before was no use to him now, and after thinking about the scythes for many hours, there seemed only one way to open to him. So, listening to make sure that all was still, he stole away to his parents and told them the whole story. When they heard everything, they hid him where no one could find him. Time passed, and the young man stayed at home doing what his parents bade him, and showing himself very different from what he had been before he went out to see the world. But one day he said to his father that he should like to marry and have a house of his own. "When I have served the king's chief herdsman," he said, "I saw his daughter, and I resolved not to try. Yeah. When I served the king's herdsman," he said, "I saw his daughter, and I'm resolved to try if I cannot win her for my wife." "It will cost you your head if you do," answered his father, shaking his head. "Well, I will do my best," replied his son. "But first give me the sword which hangs over your bed." The old man did not understand what good the sword would do. However, he took it down, and the young man went his way. Late in the evening, he arrived at the house of the herdsman, and knocked on the door, which was opened by a little boy. "I want to speak to your master," he said. "So it is you!" cried the herdsman, when he had been receiving the message. "Well, you can sleep here tonight if you wish." "I have come for something else besides a bed," replied the young man, drawing his sword. "And if you do not promise to give me your youngest daughter as my wife, I will stab you through the heart." What could the poor man do but promise? As he fetched his youngest daughter, who seemed quite pleased the proposal matched, and gave the youth her hand. When the young man went home to his parents and bade them get ready to welcome his bride, and when the wedding was over, he told his father-in-law, the herdsman, what he had done with the sheep, pigs, and cattle. By and by, the story came to the king's ears, and he thought that a man who was so clever was just the man to govern the country. So he made him his minister, and after the king himself, there was no one so great as he. Yo, we gotta keep Kanye out of politics. Okay, well, still saying the signal was excellent, but ads are coming up. So let's go ahead and go to ads, and I will try to get a couple more stories read. I'll see you in a bit. Hopefully. So did that actually have 3 minutes of ads, or was it less than that? Twitch just doesn't tell me. Anyway, welcome back from the ads and the first complete hour of stories. I'm still going to put the first part up on YouTube. Just edit them together. But hopefully I'll have decent recordings of the ones who followed. And I did look at the poll, and it looks like with a vote of 6-1, make sure just again, I'm pretty sure it said 6-1. Looks like I'll be doing my anniversary stream on my anniversary. Yep, so 6-1. I don't know why the timer went off on it. I could have sworn I had it set to end before I started the stream tonight. But it's not. Anyway. I will try to be on at my regular time for any of those who are watching the vlog tonight, or if anyone watches it tomorrow. I'm still trying to figure out if I want to try to do my model using my webcam, or be brave enough to try to use my phone for it. Oh, annoy that. Can't play Pokemon on stream. Guess I'll try not to. But you know how normally end streams around 11 o'clock if I don't have stories to do? Since I'm making up for time for the horrible first half hour, we're going to continue going. Try to do 2 or 3 more stories. How many have I done? Okay. Did the Hungry Beasts twice. So right now I've only done 3. So the 6 Hungry Beasts, the Beggar boy turned into Count Piro, which is some dudes with the fox. The Rogue and The Herdsman, which is the one I just did before the break. Next one looks like it's only 7 pages. The one after that is only 4. And after that's another 4. I might be able to get 5 more stories tonight. At least before we read out. That sound good? Let's see, that leaves 8 stories for this book. I'm not sure how I'm going to do on time for the highlights and uploads. So I had to delete everything except my channel ad to get time to even continue doing the highlights. The next ones that are going to be deleted is going to start coming off of the Rivals of Sherlock Holmes. But I really do appreciate everyone who comes back and watches my VODs here on Twitch. Because, well, I can really use ad money if nothing else. I don't get that many subscribers. But any help that you guys can do is greatly appreciated. I mean, it'd be cool if I could get the subscription so I can get a couple more emotes. Which I may try to get new emotes soon anyway. Just update the ones I have, because these are the ones I've had since I got affiliated. And I'm coming up my 3rd year of being an affiliate, in addition to my 4th year of streaming. Now I really wish I could do more. I'm getting paid bills, what am I talking about? But anyway, let's get back to the cheerier subject of people dying in fairy tales. Okay. One Voyage Motion is where this next one's from. Our next fairy tale for this evening, or folk tale, depending on which it is, Eisenkoff. Once upon a time there lived an old man who had only one son, whom he loved dearly, but they were very poor and often had scarcely enough to eat. Then the old man fell ill, and things grew worse than ever. So he called his son to him and said, "Dear boy, I have no longer any fruit to give you. You must go into the world and get it for yourself. It does not matter what work you do, but remember, if you do it well and are faithful to your master, you will always have your reward." So Peter put a piece of black bread in his knapsack, and strapping it on his back, took a stout stick in his hand, and set out to seek his fortune. For a long while he traveled on, and nobody seemed to want him. But one day he met an old man, and being a polite youth, he took off his hat and said, "Good morning," in a pleasant voice. "Good morning," said the old man. "Where are you going?" "I'm wandering through the country trying to get work," replied Peter. "Then stay with me, for I can give you plenty," and said the old man, and Peter stayed. His work did not seem hard, for he had only 2 horses and a cow to see after, and though he had been hired for a year, the year consisted of but 3 days, so that it was not long before he received his wages. In payment, the old man gave him a nut, and offered to keep him for another year. Thank you for the follow. His work did not seem hard, for he had only 2 horses and a cow to see after, and though he had been hired for a year, the year consisted of but 3 days, so that it was not long before he received his wages. As payment, the old man gave him a nut, and he offered to keep him for another year, but Peter was homesick, and besides, he would rather have been paid ever a small piece of money than a nut, for he thought nuts grow on every tree, and I can gather as many as I like. However, he did not say this to the old man, who had been kind to him, and just bade him farewell. The nearer Peter grew to his father's house, the more ashamed he felt for having brought back such poor wages. What could one nut do for him? Why, it could not even buy a slice of bacon. There was no use taking it home. He might as well eat it. So he sat down on a stone and cracked it with his teeth, and then took it out of his mouth to break off the shell. But who could ever guess what came out of that nut? Why, horses and oxen and sheep stepped out in such numbers that it seemed as if they would stretch out to the world's end. They gave Peter such a shock that he wrung his hands in dismay. What was he to do with all these creatures? Where was he to put them? He stood and gazed in terror, and at this moment Eisenkoff came by. "What's the matter, young man?" he asked. "Oh, my friend, there's plenty the matter," said Peter. "I have gained a nut for my wages, and when I cracked it open, this crowd of beasts came out, and I don't know what to do with them all." "Listen to me, son," said Eisenkoff. "If you will promise never to marry, I will drive them all back into the nut." In his trouble, Peter would have promised far harder things than this, so he gladly gave his prizes to Eisenkoff asked for, and at a whistle from the stranger, the animals began crowding into the nut again, nearly tumbling over each other in their haste. When the last foot got inside, the 2 halves of the nut shut close. Then Peter put it in his pocket and went on to his house. No sooner had he reached it than he cracked the nut for the 2nd time, and out came the horses and sheep and oxen again. Indeed, Peter thought that even more of them than before. The old man could not believe his eyes when he saw the multitudes of horses, oxen, and sheep standing before the door. "How did you come by all these?" he gasped as soon as he could speak, and the son told him the whole story, and the promise he had given to Eisenkoff. The next day, some of the cattle were driven to the market and sold, and with the money the old man was able to buy some fields and gardens around his house. In a few months he had grown the richest, most prosperous man in the whole village. Everything seemed to turn to gold in his hands, till one day when he and his son were sitting in the orchard watching their herds of cattle grazing on the meadows, he suddenly said, "Peter, my boy, it's time for you thinking about marrying." "But my father, I told you I could never marry because of the promise I gave to Eisenhoff." "Oh, one keeps promises here and there. No one thinks of keeping such promises. If Eisenkoff does not like you marrying, then he should put up with it all the same. Besides, there stands in the stable a gray horse which is saddled night and day, and if Eisenkoff should show his face, you've only got to jump on the horse's back and ride away. Nobody on earth could catch you. When all is safe, you can come back again, and we shall live happily as two fish in the sea." And it so happened the young man found a pretty brown-skinned girl who was willing to have him for a husband. The whole village came to the wedding feast. The music was its gayest, and the dance was its merriest, and Eisenkoff looked in the window. "Oh, dear brother, what's going on here? It has the air of being a wedding feast, yet I fancied, was I mistaken, that you had given me a promise that you would never marry." But Peter had not waited for the end of his speech. Scarcely had he seen Eisenkoff that he darted like the wind to the stable and flung himself on the horse's back. In another moment he was away over the mountain, with Eisenkoff running fast behind him. On they went through the thick forest where the sun never shone, over rivers so wide that it took a whole day to sail across them, up hills whose sides were all of glass, and on they went 7 times in 7 countries till Peter reined in his horse before the house of an old woman. "Good day, mother," he said, jumping down and opening the door.
"Good day, my son," answered she. "And what are you doing here at the world's end?"
"I'm flying for my life, mother, flying to the world which is beyond all worlds, for Eisenkoff is at my heels."
"Come in and rest then, and have some food, for I have a little dog who will begin to howl when Eisenkoff is still 7 miles off."
So Peter went in and warmed himself, and ate and drank, till suddenly the dog began to howl.
"Quick, my son, you must go,"
cried the old woman, and the lightning itself was not quicker than Peter.
"Stop a moment,"
cried the old woman again, just as he was mounting the horse.
"Take this napkin and this cake and put them in your bag where you can get hold of them easily."
Peter took them and put them into his bag, and waving his thanks for her kindness, he was off like the wind. Round and round he rode, through 7 times 7 countries, through forests still thicker, and rivers still wider, and mountains still more slippery than the others he had passed, till at length he reached the house where dwelt another old woman. "Good day, old woman." "Good day, mother," he said.
"Good day, my son. Why are you seeking here at the world's end?"
"I'm flying for my life, mother, flying to the world that is beyond worlds, for Eisenkoff is at my heels."
"Come in, my son, and have some food. I have a little dog who will begin to howl when Eisenkoff is still 7 miles off. So lie in this bed and rest yourself in peace."
Then she went to the kitchen and baked a number of cakes, more than Peter could have eaten in a whole month. He had not finished a quart of them when the dog began to howl.
"Now, my son, you must go," cried the old woman. "But first put these cakes and this napkin in your bag, where you can easily get them."
So Peter thanked her, and off again he was like the wind. On he rode through 7 times 7 countries, till he came to a house of a third old woman, who welcomed him as the others had done. But when the dog howled and Peter sprang up, she said, as she gave him the same gifts of the journey. "For now you have 3 cakes and 3 napkins, for I know that my sisters have each given you one. Listen to me and do as I tell you. Ride 7 days and nights straight before you, and on the 8th morning you will be seeing a great fire. Strike it 3 times with the 3 napkins, and it will part in 2. Then ride into the opening, and when you are in the middle of the opening, throw the 3 cakes behind your back with your left hand." Peter thanked her for her counsel, and was careful to do exactly all the old woman had told him. On the 8th morning he reached the fire so large that he could see nothing else on either side. But when he struck it with the napkins, it parted, and stood on each hand on the wall. He rode through the opening. He threw the cakes behind him. From each cake there sprang a huge dog, and gave them the names: the World's Weight, Iron Strong, and Quick Ear. Adiva. They bayed with joy at the sight of him, and Peter had turned to pat them. He beheld Eisenkoff at the edge of the fire. But the opening had closed up behind Peter, and he could not get through. "Stop, you promise-breaker!" he shrieked. "You have slipped through my hands once, but I will catch you again!" Then he lay down by the fire and waited to see what would happen. When Peter knew that he had nothing more to fear of Eisenkoff, he rode on slowly till he came to a small white house. Here he entered and found himself in a room where a gray-haired woman was spinning, and a beautiful girl was sitting in the window combing her golden hair. "What brings you here, my son?" asked the old woman. "I am seeking a place, mother," answered Peter. "Stay with me, for I need a servant," said the old woman. "With pleasure, mother," he replied. After that, Peter's life was a very happy one. He sowed and plowed all day, except now and then when he took his dogs and went to hunt. And whatever game he brought back, the maiden with the golden hair knew how to dress it. One day the old woman had gone to the town to buy some flour, and Peter and the maiden were left alone in the house. They fell into talk, and she asked him where his home was and how he managed to come through the fire. Peter then told her the whole story, and of his striking the flames with the 3 napkins as he had been told to do. The maiden listened attentively and wondered in herself whether that what he said was true. So after Peter had gone out to the fields, she crept up to his room and stole the napkins, and then set off as fast as she could to the fire by the path she knew over the hill. At the 3rd blow she gave, the flames divided, and Eisenkoff, who had been watching and hoping for a chance of this kind, ran down the opening and stood before her. At this sight the maiden was almost frightened to death, but with a great effort she recovered herself and ran home as fast as her legs would carry her, closely pursued by Eisenkoff. Panting for breath, she rushed into the house and fell fainting to the floor, but Eisenkoff entered behind her and hid himself in the kitchen underneath the hearth. Not long after, Peter came in and picked up the 3 napkins which the maiden had dropped on the threshold. He wondered how they got there, for he knew he had left them in his room. But what to his horror when he saw the form of the fainting girl lying where she had dropped, as still and white as if she had been dead. He lifted her up and carried her to her bed, where he soon revived, but she did not tell Peter about Eisenkoff, who had been almost crushed to death under the hearthstone by the body of World's Weight. Next morning Peter locked up his dogs and went into the forest, alone. Eisenkoff, however, had seen him go and followed so closely at his heels that Peter had barely time to clamber up a tall tree where Eisenkoff could not reach him. "Come down at once, you gallows bird!" he cried. "Have you forgotten your promise that you would never marry?" "Oh, I know it is all up with me," answered Peter, "but let me call out 3 times.
"You can call 100 times if you'd like," returned Eisenkoff, "for now I've got power, and now I've got you in my power, and you shall pay for what you have done."
"Iron Strong, World's Weight, Quick Ear, fly to my help!" cried Peter. And Quick Ear heard, and said to his brothers, "Listen, master's calling us." "You're dreaming, fool," answered World's Weight. "Why has he not finished breakfast?" And he gave Quick Ear a slap with his paw, for he was young and needed to be taught sense. Armstrong, world's weights! Quick here! Quick, fly to my help! This time, World's Weight also heard, and he said, now Master's really calling. Oh, silly you are, answered Ironstrong. You know at this hour he's always eating. And he gave World's Weight a cuff, because he was old enough to know better. Peter sat trembling in the tree, dreading lest his dogs had never heard, or else that, having heard, they refused to come. It was his last chance, so making a mighty effort, he shrieked once more, Ironstrong, World's Weight, quick here, fly to my help, or I'm a dead man! And Ironstrong heard and said, Yes, he is certainly calling. We must go at once. In an instant, he had burst open the door, and all three were bounding away in the direction of his voice. When they reached the foot of the tree, Peter said, Adam! And in all few minutes, there was nothing left of Eisenkoff. As soon as his enemy was dead, Peter got down and returned to the house, where he bade farewell to the old woman and her daughter, who gave him a beautiful ring all set with diamonds. It was really a magic ring, but neither Peter nor the maiden knew that. Peter's heart was heavy as he set out for home. He had ceased to love his wife with whom he had left his wedding feast, and his heart had gone out for the golden-haired girl. However, it was no use thinking that, so he rode forward steadily. The fire had to be passed through before he had gone very far, and when he came to it, Peter shook the 3 napkins in the flames and the passage opened for him. Then a curious thing happened. The 3 dogs who had followed at his heels all this way now became 3 cakes again, which Peter put into his bag with the napkins. After that he stopped at the houses of the 3 old women and gave each woman back her napkin and her cake. Where's my wife? Asked Peter when he got home. My dear son, why did you leave us? After you vanished, no one knew where, your poor wife grew more and more wretched, and would neither eat nor drink. Little by little she faded away, and a month later we laid her in a grave, to hide the sorrows under the earth. At this news, Peter began to weep, for he had loved his wife before he went away, and had seen the golden-haired maiden. He went sorrowfully about his work for the space of half a year, when one night he dreamed that he moved the diamond ring given to him by the maiden from his left hand, and put it on the wedding finger on his right. The dream was so real that he awoke at once and changed the ring from one hand to the other, and as he did so, guess what he saw? Why, the golden-haired maiden standing before him. He sprang up and kissed her and said, Now you are mine forever and ever, and when we die we will both be buried in one grave. And so they were. I don't really see more on that. I mean, leaving your wife behind makes them sort of first they want to die. Continuing. You had a nice tan-skinned girl. Who wasn't supposed to get married. Anyway. The death of Abu Nowas and his wife. Once upon a time there lived a man whose name was Abu Nowas, and he was a great favorite of the Sultan of the country, who had a palace in the same town where Abu Nowas dwelt. One day Abu Nowas came weeping into the hall of the palace where the Sultan was sitting, and said to him, O mighty Sultan, my wife is dead. That is bad news, replied the Sultan. I must get you another wife. And he bade his Grand Vizier to send for the Sultana. This poor Abu Nowas has lost his wife, he said, when she entered the hall. Oh, then we must get him another, answered the Sultana. I have a girl that would just suit him exactly. And she clapped her hands together. At this signal, a maiden appeared and stood before her. I've got a husband for you, said the Sultana. Who is he? asked the girl. Abu Nowas. Abu Nowas, the jester, replied the Sultana. I will take him, answered the maiden, and as Abu Nowas made no objection, it was all arranged. The Sultana had the most beautiful clothes made for the bride, and the Sultan gave the bridegroom his wedding suit, and 1,000 gold pieces into the bargain, and soft carpets for his house. So Abu Nawas took his wife home, and for some time they were very happy, and spent the money freely which the Sultan had given them, never thinking that they should do more when that was gone. But come to an end it did, and they had to sell their fine things one by one, till at length nothing was left but a cloak piece and one blanket to cover them. "We've run through our fortune," said Abu Nawas. "What are we to do now? I'm afraid to go back to the Sultan, for he will command his servants to turn me from the door. But you shall return to your mistress and throw yourself at her feet and weep, and perhaps she will help us."
"Oh, you had much better go," said the wife. "I shall not know what to say."
"Well, then, stay at home if you like," answered Abu Nawas, "and I will ask to be admitted to the Sultan's presence, and will tell him with sobs that my wife is dead, and that I have no money for her burial. When he hears that, perhaps he will give us something."
"That's a good plan,"
said the wife, and Abu Nawas set out. The Sultan was sitting in the Hall of Justice when Abu Nawas entered, his eyes streaming with tears, for he had rubbed some pepper to them. They smarted dreadfully, and he could hardly see to walk straight, and everybody wondered what was the matter with him. "Abu Nawas, what has happened?" cried the Sultan. "Oh, noble Sultan, my wife is dead," wept he. "We all must die," answered the Sultan, but this was not the reply for which Abu Nawas had hoped. "True, O Sultan, but I have neither shroud to wrap her in nor money to bury her with," went on Abu Nawas, in no wise abashed by the way the Sultan had received his news. "Well, give him 100 pieces of gold," said the Sultan, turning to the Grand Vizier. And when the money was counted out, Abu Nawas bowed low and left the hall, his tears still flowing, but with joy in his heart.
"Have you got anything?"
cried his wife, who was waiting for him anxiously. "Yes, 100 gold pieces," he said, throwing down the bag, "but that will not last us any time. Now you must go to the Sultana, clothed in a sackcloth and robes of mourning, and tell her that your husband, Abu Nawas, is dead, and you have no money for his burial. When she hears that, she will be sure to ask you what has become of the money and fine clothes she gave us on our marriage. You'll answer, 'Before he died, he sold everything.'" The wife did as she was told, wrapping herself in a sackcloth, and went up to the Sultana's own palace, and she was shown to have one of the Sabia's favorite attendants. She was taken without difficulty into the private apartments.
"What is the matter?"
inquired the Sultana at the sight of the dismal figure.
"My husband lies dead at home. They spent all our money and sold everything. I have nothing left to bury him with," sobbed the wife.
Then Sabina took up a purse containing 200 gold pieces and said,
"Your husband served us long and faithfully. You must see that he has a fine funeral."
The wife took the money, and kissing the feet of the Sultana, she joyfully hastened home. They spent some happy hours planning how they should spend it, and thinking how clever they had been. "When the Sultan goes this evening to Sabina's palace," said Noah, "she will be sure to tell him that Abu Nawas is dead. Not Abu Nawas, if it's his wife," he will reply, "and they will quarrel over it, and all the time we shall be sitting here enjoying ourselves. Oh, if they only knew how angry they would be." As Abu Nawas had foreseen, the Sultan went, and in the evening his business was over, to pay his usual visit to Sabina.
"Poor Nowas is dead,"
Sabina said when he entered the room. "It was not Abu Nawas, but his wife who was dead," answered the Sultan.
"No, really, you're quite wrong. She came to tell me herself only a couple of hours ago,"
replied Sabina.
"And as he spent all their money, I gave her something to bury him with."
"You must be dreaming," exclaimed the Sultan. "Soon after midday, Abu Nawas came into the hall with his eyes streaming with tears. And when I asked him the reason, he asked his wife was dead, and they had sold everything they had, and he had nothing left, so much as would buy her a shroud, far less for a funeral." For a long time they talked, and neither would listen to the other, So the Sultan sent for the doorkeeper and bade him go instantly to the house of Abu Nowas and see if it was the man or wife who was dead. But Abu Nowas happened to be sitting with his wife behind a latticed window, which looked into the street, and saw the man coming, and sprang up at once. "There's the Sultan's doorkeeper. They've sent him here to find out the truth. Quick, throw yourself on the bed and pretend that you are dead." And in a moment his wife was stretched out stiffly, with the linen sheets spread across her, like a corpse. She was only just in time, for the sheet was hardly drawn across her when the door opened and the porter came in. "Has anything happened?" asked he. "My poor wife is dead," replied Abu Nowas. "Look, she is laid out here." And the porter approached the bed, which was in the corner of the room, and saw the stiff form lying underneath. "We must all die," he said, and he went back to the Sultan. "Well, have you found out which of them is dead?" asked the Sultan. "Yes, noble Sultan, it is a wife," replied the porter. "He only says that to please you," cried Sabina in a rage. Calling her own chamberlain, she ordered him to go at once to the dwelling of Abu Nowas to see which of the two was dead. "And be sure to tell the truth about it," she said, "or it will be the worse for you." As the chamberlain drew near the house, Abu Nowas caught sight of him. "There's the Sultana's chamberlain," he exclaimed in fright. "Now it is my turn to die. Be quick and spread the sheet over me." And he laid himself on the bed and held his breath when the chamberlain came in. "What are you weeping for?" asked the man, finding the wife in tears. "My husband is dead," answered she, pointing to the bed. And the chamberlain drew back the sheet and beheld Abu Nowas lying stiff and motionless. Then he gently replaced the sheet and returned to the palace. "Well, have you found out this time?" asked the Sultan. "My lord, it is the husband who is dead." "But I tell you he was with me only a few hours ago," cried the Sultan angrily. "I must get to the bottom of this before I sleep. Let my golden coach be brought round at once." The coach was before the door in another 5 minutes, and the Sultan and Sultana both got in. Abu Nowas was ceased staying a dead man, and was looking into the street when he saw the coach coming. "Quick, wife, quick!" he called. "The Sultan will be here directly, and we must both be dead to receive him." So they laid themselves down and spread the sheet over them, and held their breath. At the instant the Sultan entered, followed by the Sultana and the chamberlain, and he went up to the bed and found the corpses stiff and motionless. "I will give 1,000 gold pieces to anyone who will tell me the truth of this," he cried. Then at his words, Abu Nowas sat up. "Give them to me, then," said he, holding out his hand. "You cannot give them to anyone who needs them more." "Oh, Abu Nowas, you impudent dog!" exclaimed the Sultan, bursting into a laugh, in which the Sultana joined. "I might have known it was one of your tricks." But he sent Abu Nowas the gold he had promised, and let us hope that it did not fly so fast as the last had done. That was funny. Okay. Adapted from the dog manga. Sounds interesting. Definitely an interesting title. So the next story, Motikatika. Sounds familiar. Once upon a time, in a very hot country, a man lived with his wife in a little hut, which was surrounded by grass and flowers. They were perfectly happy together, until by and by the woman fell ill and refused to take any food. The husband tried to persuade her to eat all sorts of delicious fruits that he had found in the forest, but she would have none of them, and grew so thin he feared that she would die. "Is there nothing you would like?" he said, at last in despair. "Yes, I could eat some wild honey," she answered. Her husband was overjoyed, for he thought that sounded easy enough to get, and he went off at once to search for it. When he came back with a wooden pan full, he gave it to his wife. "I can't eat that," she said, turning away in disgust. "Look, there's some dead bees in it. I want honey that is quite pure." and the woman and the man threw the rejected honey on the grass and started off to get some fresh. When he got back, he offered it to his wife and treated it as she had done the first bowlful. "That honey's got ants in it. Throw it away," she said, and when he brought her some more, she declared it was full of earth. In his fourth journey, he managed to find some that she would eat, and then she begged him to get her some water. This took him some more time, but at length he came to a lake whose waters were sweetened with sugar. He filled a pannikin quite full and carried it home to his wife, who drank it eagerly, and said she now felt quite well. When she was up and she had dressed herself, her husband lay down in her place, saying, "You have given me a great deal of trouble. Now it is my turn." "What is the matter with you?" asked the wife. "I'm thirsty and want some water," he asked. And she took a large pot and carried it to the nearest spring, which was a good way off. "Here is the water," she said to her husband, lifting the heavy pot from her head, but he turned away in disgust. "You've drawn it from the pool that is full of frogs and hollows. You must get some more." Now the woman set off and walked some further to another lake. "This water tastes of rushes," he exclaimed. "Go and get some fresh." But when she brought back the third supply, he declared that it seemed made up of water lilies, and that he must have water that was pure and not spoiled by willows, frogs, or rushes. So the fourth time she put her jug on her head, and passing all the lakes she had hitherto tried, she came to another, where the water was golden like honey. She stooped down to drink, when a horrible head bobbed up to the surface.
"How dare you steal my water?"
cried the head.
"It is my husband who has sent me," she replied, trembling all over. "But do not kill me. You shall have my baby if you will only let me go."
"How am I to know which is your baby?"
cried the ogre.
"Oh, that is easily managed. I'll shave both sides of his head and hang some white beads around his neck. And when you come to the hut, you will have to call Motikatika, and he will run to meet you, and you can eat him."
"Very well," said the ogre. "You can go home."
After filling the pot, she returned and told her husband of the dreadful danger she had been in. Now, though his mother did not know it, the baby was a magician, and he had heard all that his mother had promised the ogre, and he laughed to himself as he planned how to outwit her. The next morning she shaved his head on both sides, and hung the white beads around his neck, and said to him, "I'm going to the fields to work, but you must stay at home. Be sure not to go outside, or some wild beast may eat you."
"Very well,"
he answered. As soon as his mother was out of sight, the baby took out some magic bones and placed them in a row before him.
"You are my father," he told one bone. "You are my mother. You are the biggest," he said to the third. "You shall be the ogre who wants to eat me, and you,"
to another,
"are very little, and therefore you shall be me. Now then, tell me what am I to do?"
"Collect all the babies in the village, same size as yourself," answered the bones. "Shave the sides of their heads and hang white beads around their necks, and tell them that anyone calls Motikatika, they shall to answer it. And be quick, for you have no time to lose."
Motikatika went out directly and brought back quite a crowd of babies, and shaved their heads and hung white beads around their little black necks. Just as he had finished, the ground began to shake, and the huge ogre came striding along, calling,
"Motikatika! Motikatika!"
"Here we are! Here we are!"
answered the babies, all running to meet him.
"It is Motikatika I want,"
said the ogre.
"We are all Motikatika,"
they replied. And the ogre sat down in bewilderment, for he dared not eat the children of the people who had done him no wrong, for a heavy punishment would befall him. The children waited for a little, wondering, and then they all went away. The ogre remained where he was till the evening, when the woman returned from the fields.
"I have not seen Motikatika," he said.
"Why did you not call him by his name, as I told you?" she answered.
I did, but all the babies in the village seem to be named Motikatika, said the ogre. You cannot think the number who came running to me.
The woman did not know what to make of it, so to keep him in a good temper, she entered the hut and prepared a bowl of maize, which she brought to him.
I do not want maize, I want the baby, grumbled he, and I will have him.
Have patience, answered she. I will call him and you can eat him at once.
And she went to the hut and cried,
Motikatika! I'm coming, mother, answered he.
But first he took out his bones, and crouching low to the ground behind the hut, he asked him how he should escape.
Change yourself into a mouse,
said the bones, and so he did. And the ogre grew tired of waiting and told the woman she must invent some other plan.
Tomorrow I will send him into the field to pick some beans for me, and you can find him there and can eat him.
Very well, replied the ogre. This time I will take care to have him.
And he went back to his lake. The next morning, Motikatika was sent out with a basket and told to pick some beans for dinner. On the way to the field, he took out his bones and asked him what he has to do to escape the ogre.
Change yourself into a bird and snap off the beans, said Bones.
The ogre chased away the bird, not knowing this Motikatika. The ogre went back to the hut and told the woman that she had deceived him again, and that he would not be put off any longer.
Return here this evening, answered she. You will find him on the bed under a white coverlet. You can carry him away and eat him at once.
But the boy heard and consulted his bones, who said,
Take the red coverlet from your father's bed and put yours on his.
And so he did, and when the ogre came, he seized Motikatika's father and carried him outside the hut and ate him. When his wife found out the mistake, she cried bitterly, but Motikatika said,
It is only just that he should be eaten, and not I, for it was he, not I, who sent you to fetch the water.
Welcome in, guilty. And congrats on getting first part 2. Technical errors, and I have to restart the stream. Yes, I'm running late because of such disturbances in technology. How's your night been? I think I've got it in me to read one more story. Yay, Phil's about actually worked. Didn't trigger for Taka earlier. Okay, let's see. I know I've read Motikatika before. Why would it be in another book in the series unless they lost track of it? Because the name's the same.
Name's the same. What am I doing in this voice? What the hell?
Anyway. Yeah, I'm going to try to get one more story for the night so I get a full 2 hours of a single stream as opposed to 2.5 hours of one. Oh, it doesn't want to say. But it has fun names, so I guess it might be German. So our next story, possibly the final for tonight, Niels and the Giants. One of the great moors over in Jutland, the trees won't grow because the soil is so sandy and the wind so strong. There once lived a man and his wife who had a little house and some sheep, and 2 sons who helped them to herd them. The elder of the 2 was Rasmus, the younger Niels. Rasmus was quite content to look after the sheep, as his father had done before him. But Niels had a fancy to be a hunter, and was not happy till he got hold of a gun and learned to shoot. It was only a muzzle-loading flintlock after all, but Niels thought it a great prize, and went about shooting everything he could see. So much did he practice, that in the long run he became a wonderful shot, and was heard of even where he had never been seen. Some people said there was very little in him beyond this, but the idea that they found a reason to change in the course of time. The parents of Rasmus and Niels were good Catholics, and when they were getting old, the mother took it into her head that she would like to go to Rome and see the Pope. The others didn't see much use in this, but she had her way in the end. They sold all the sheep and shut up the house, and set out for Rome on foot. Niels took his gun with him. "What do you want that for?" asked Rasmus. "We have plenty to carry without it." But Niels would not be happy without his gun, and took it all the same. It was the hottest part of summer that they began their journey, so hot that they could not travel at all during the middle of the day, and they were afraid to do it by night, lest they should lose their way or fall into the hands of robbers. One day, a little before sunset, they came to an inn which lay at the edge of the forest. "We'll better stay here for the night," said Rasmus. "What an idea," said Niels, who was growing impatient at the slow progress they were making. "We can't travel by the day of the heat and remain where we are all night. It'll be long enough before we get to Rome if we go on this rate." Rasmus was unwilling to go on, but the two old people sided with Niels, who said, "The nights aren't dark and the moon will be up soon. We can ask at the inn and find out which way we ought to take." So they held on for some time, but at last they came to a small opening in the forest, and here they found that the road split in two. There was no signpost to direct them, and the people in the inn had not told them which of the two roads to take. "What's to be done now?" said Rasmus. "I think we'd better have stayed at the inn." "There's no harm done," said Niels. "The night is warm and we can wait here till morning. One of us will keep watch till midnight and then waken the other." Rasmus chose to take the first watch, and the others lay down to sleep. It was very quiet in the forest, and Rasmus could hear the deer and foxes and other animals moving about and rustling leaves. After the moon rose, he could see them occasionally, and when a big stag came quite close to him, he got a hold of Niels' gun and shot it. Niels was awakened by the report. "What's that?" he said. "I just shot a stag," said Rasmus, highly pleased with himself. "Well, that's nothing," said Niels. "I've often shot a sparrow, which is a much more difficult thing to do." It was now close to midnight, so Niels began his watch, and Rasmus went to sleep. It began to get colder, and Niels began to walk about a little to keep himself warm. He soon found that they were not far from the edge of the forest, and when he climbed up in one of the trees there, he could see out over the country just beyond. In a little distance he saw a fire, and beside it there sat three giants. They were busy with broth and beef. They were so huge that the spoons they used were as large as spades, and their forks were as big as hay forks. With these they lifted whole bucketfuls of broth and great joints of meat out of the enormous pot which was set on the ground between them. Niels was startled and rather scared at first, but he comforted himself with the thought that the giants were a good way off, and that if he came near he could easily hide among the bushes. After watching them for a little, however, he began to get over his alarm, and finally slid down the tree again, resolved to get his gun and play some tricks on them. When he had climbed back to his former position, he took a good aim and waited till one of the giants was just in the act of putting a large piece of meat into his mouth. Bang! went Niels' gun, and the bullet struck the handle of the fork so hard that the point went into the giant's chin instead of the mouth. "None of your tricks," cried the giant to the one who sat next to him. "What do you mean hitting my fork like that and making me prick myself?" "I never touched your fork," said the other. "Don't try to get up in a quarrel with me." "Look at it," said the first. Do you suppose I stuck it in my own shame for fun? The two got so angry over the matter that they each offered to fight, there and there. But the third giant acted as a peacemaker, and they fell again to their eating. While the quarrel was going on, Niels had loaded his gun again. Just as the second giant was about to put a nice tidbit into his mouth, bang! The gun went again. The fork flew into a dozen pieces. This giant was even more furious than the first one had been, and words were just coming to blows, and the third giant stepped in once more. "Don't be fools," he said to them. "What's the good of beginning to fight among ourselves when there's necessity for the three of us to work together and get the upper hand over the king of this country? It will be hard enough task as it is, but we'll all be together hopeless if we don't stick together. Just sit down and let us finish our meal. I shall sit between you two. Neither of you can blame the other." Niels was too far away to hear the conversation, but from the gestures he could guess what was happening, and thought it good fun. "Thrice as lucky," he said to himself. "I'll have another shot yet." This time it was the third giant's fork that caught the bullet, and snapped in two. "Well," he said, "if I weren't as foolish as you two, I would also find to a rage. But I begin to see what time of day it is, and I'm going off this minute to see who it is playing these tricks." So well had the giant made his observations that though Niels climbed down the tree as fast as he could so as to hide among the bushes, they just got to the ground when his enemy was upon him. "Stay where you are," said the giant, "or I'll put my foot on you, and there won't be much left after that." Niels gave in, and the giant carried him back to his comrades. "You don't deserve mercy at our hands," said his captor, "but as you are such a good shot, you may be of great use to us, so we shall spare your life, if you will do us a service. Not far from here serves a castle in which the king's daughter lives. We're at war with the king and want to get the upper hand by carrying off the princess. But the castle is so well guarded that there's not getting men through it. By our skill and magic, we have cast sleep on everything inside the castle, except the little black dog, and as long as he is awake, we are no better off than before. As soon as we begin to climb the castle, the little dog will hear us, and his barks will awaken all the others again. Having got to you, we can place you where we will be able to shoot the dog before it begins to bark, and then no one can hinder us from getting the princess into our hands. If you do that, we shall not only let you off, but reward you handsomely." Niels had to consent, and the giants set off for the castle at once. It was surrounded by a very high rampart, so high that even the giants could not touch the top of it. "Well, how am I to get over that?" said Niels. "Quite easily," said the third giant. "I'll throw you up on it." "No thanks," said Niels. "I might fall down on the other side, or break my leg or neck, and then the little dog won't get shot after all." "Never fear of that," said the giant. "The rampart is quite wide on top and covered in long grass, so that you will come down as softly as though you fell off a feather bed." Niels had to believe him and allowed the giant to throw him up. He came down on his feet quite unhurt, but the little black dog heard the dump and rushed out of his kennel at once. It was just opening its mouth to bark when Niels fired. It fell dead on the spot. "Now get down and go inside," said the giant, "and see if you can open the gate for us." Niels made his way down into the courtyard, but on his way to the outer gate he found himself at the entrance of a large hall of the castle. The door was open and the hall brightly lighted, though there was no one to be seen. Niels went in there and looked around him, and there on the wall hung a huge sword without a sheath, and beneath it a large drinking horn mounted with silver. Niels went closer at these, and saw that the horn had letters engraved on the silver rim. When he took it down and turned it around, he found the inscription used: "Whoever drinks the wine I hold, and wields the sword that above hangs." tries again, so I can get the ring. Whoever drinks the wine I hold can wield the sword that hangs above. Let him use it for the rights and win the royal maiden's love. Niels took down the silver stopper of the horn and drank some of the wine. Then he tried to take down the sword, and he found himself unable to move it. So he hung up the horn again and went a little further in the castle. Giants can wait a little, he said. Not long before, he came to an apartment where such a beautiful princess lay asleep in a bed, and on her table by her side there lay a gold-hemmed handkerchief. Niels tore this in two and put one half in his pocket, leaving the other half on the table. On the floor he saw a pair of gold-embroidered slippers, and one of these he also put in his pocket. After that he went back to the hall and took down the horn again. Perhaps I have to drink all that's in it before I can move the sword, he thought. So he put it to his lips and drank till it was quite empty. When he had done this, he could wield the sword with the greatest of ease, and felt himself strong enough to do anything, even to fight the giants he had left outside, who were no doubt wondering why he had not opened the gate for them before this time. To kill the giants, he thought, would be using the sword for the right. As to winning the love of the princess, that is the thing which the son of a poor sheep farmer need not hope for. When Niels came to the gate of the castle, he found that there was a large door and a small one, so he opened the later. "Can't you open the big door?" said the giants. "We shall hardly be able to get in that one." "The bars are too heavy for me to draw," said Niels. "If you stoop a little, you can quite well come in here." The first giant accordingly bent down and entered through stooping posture. But before he had come to straighten his back again, Niels made a sweep with the sword, and off went the giant's head. To push the body aside it felt was quite easy for Niels, so strong had the wine made him. As the second giant entered, he met the same reception. The third was slower in coming, and Niels called out to him. "Be quick," he said. "You're surely the oldest of the three, since you are so slow in your movements, but I can't wait here long. I must get back to my own people as soon as possible." So the third also came in, and was served the same way. It appears from the story that giants were not given fair play. By this time, day was beginning to break, and Niels thought that his folks might already be searching for him. So instead of waiting to see what took place in the castle, he ran off to the forest as fast as he could, taking the sword with him. He found the others still asleep, so he woke them, and again they set out on their journey. Of the night's adventures, he said not a word, and when they asked where he got the sword, he only pointed in the direction of the castle and said, "Over that way." They thought he had found it, and asked no more questions. When Niels left the castle, he shut the door behind him, and it was closed with such a bang that the porter had woken up. He could scarcely believe his eyes when he saw 3 headless giants lying in a heap in the courtyard, and could not imagine what had taken place. The whole castle was soon aroused, and then everybody wondered at the affair. It was soon seen that the bodies were those of the king's greatest enemies, but how they had come to be there in that condition was a perfect mystery. Thank you for that. Giants' voices take a lot of effort. Then it was noticed that the drinking horn was empty and the sword was gone, while the princess reported that half of her handkerchief and one of her slippers had been taken away. How the giants had been killed seemed a little clearer now, but who had done it was a great puzzle as before. The old knight who had charge of the castle said in his opinion it must have been some young knight, who had immediately set off to the king to claim the hand of the princess. This sounded likely, but the messenger who was sent to the court returned with the news that no one there knew anything about the matter. "Must find him, however," said the princess, "for if he is willing to marry me, I cannot in honor refuse him, after what my father put through the horn." She took the counsel with her father's wisest men to what ought to be done, and among other things they advised her to build a house beside the highway and put a door over with the inscription, "Whoever will tell the story of his life may stay here for 3 nights for nothing." This was done, and many strange tales were told to the princess, but none of the travelers said a word about the three giants. In the meantime, Niels and the others tramped on towards Rome. Autumn passed, and winter was just beginning when they came to the foot of the great range of mountains, towering up to the sky. "Must we go over these?" said they. "We shall be frozen to death or buried in snow." "Here comes a man," said Niels. "Let us ask him the way to Rome." They did so, and were told that there was no other way. "And it isn't far yet," said the old people, who were beginning to be worn out by the long journey. The man held up his foot so that they could see the sole of his shoe. It was so worn thin as paper, and there was a hole in the middle of it. "These shoes were quite new when I left Rome," he said. "Look at them now. That will tell you whether you are far from it or not." This discouraged the old people so much that they gave up all thought of finishing the journey, and only wished to get back to Denmark as quickly as they could. But that winter, on bad roads, it took longer to return than they had taken to go, but in the end they found themselves in sight of the forest where they had slept before. "What's this?" said Martin. "There's a big house built since we passed this way before." "Is it so?" said Peter. "Let's stay in it all night." "No, we can't afford that," said the old people. "We're far too near the like of us." They literally changed his name. Try this with the right name. "So it is," said Niels. "Let's stay all night in it." "No, we can't afford that," said the old people. "It'd be too dear for the likes of us." However, when they saw what was written above the door, they were all well pleased to get a night's lodging for nothing. They were well received and had much attention given to them, but the old people were quite put out by it. After they got some time to rest themselves, the princess's steward came to hear their story. "You saw what was written above the door," he said to the father. "Tell me who you are and what your history has been." "Dear me, I have nothing of importance to tell you," said the old man. "And I'm sure we would never have made so bold as to trouble you if it hadn't been for our youngest of the two sons here." "Never mind that," said the steward. "You're very welcome if you will only tell me the story of your life." "Oh, well, I will," said he. "But there's nothing to tell you. I and my wife have lived all our days in the moor of North Jutland, until this last year when she took a fancy to go to Rome. We set out with our two sons, but turned back long before we got there, and we're now on our way home again. That's all my own story, and our two sons have lived with us all their days, so there's nothing more to be told about them either." "Yes, there is," said Rose. "When we were on our way south and slept in the woods near here one night, I shot a stag." The steward was much accustomed to hearing stories of no importance that he thought there was no use going further with this, but reported to the princess that the newcomers had nothing to tell. "Did you question them all?" she said. "Well, no, not directly," he said, "but the father said that none of them would tell me any more than he had done." "You're getting careless," said the princess. "I shall go and talk to them myself." Niels knew the princess again as soon as she entered the room, and was greatly alarmed, for immediately supposed all this was his device to discover the person who had run away with the sword, the slipper, and half the handkerchief. And that it would fare badly for him if he were discovered. So he told his story much the same as the others did. Niels was not very particular, and thought he had escaped the further trouble till Nowas put his word. "You've forgotten something, Niels," he said. "Remember you found a sword near here that night I shot the stag." "Where's the sword?" said the princess. "I know," said the steward. "I saw where he laid it down when they came in." And off he went to fetch it, while Niels wondered whether he could make his escape in the meantime. Before he made up his mind, however, the steward was back with the sword, which the princess recognized at once. "Where did you get this?" she said to Niels. Niels was silent and wondered what the usual penalty was for a poor sheep farmer's son who was so unfortunate to deliver a princess and carry things off from her bedroom.
See what else he has about him,
said the princess to his steward, and Niels had to submit to being searched. Out of one pocket came a gold-embroidered slipper, out of another half of the gold-hemmed handkerchief.
That is enough, said the princess. Now we needn't ask any more questions. Send for my father, the king, at once.
Please let me go, said Niels. I didn't so much good as harm, at any rate.
Who said anything about doing harm, said the princess. You must stay here until my father comes.
The way in which the princess smiled at him when she said this gave Niels some hope that things might not be bad for him after all, and he was yet more encouraged when he thought of the words engraver had in horn, though the last line still seemed too good to be true. However, the arrival of the king soon settled the matter. The princess was willing, and so was Niels. In a few days the wedding bells were ringing. Niels was made the earl by that time, and looked as handsome as any time they had dressed him in all his robes. Before long, the old king died, and Niels reigned after him. But whether his father and mother stayed with him, or went back to the moor in Jutland, or were sent to Rome in a carriage and four, is something that all the historians of this reign forget to mention. Yay! I'm tired, and ads are trying to pop up again. But thank you all for coming in. And it does seem that I'll be doing my anniversary thing this Sunday because people have voted. All 7 of you. Pretty much, I'm going to play a game, maybe talk about a couple of things, 4th anniversary stuff, that kind of thing. I don't really have a lot planned, but it's 4th anniversary, and I don't play games very often. And there's a game that I saw that was and the Fable Woods, so kind of mystery horror type of thing. And, might do some more. I don't know. But let's see if I can find someone to read tonight. Though I can see at least one person. Let's see if there's also. Who's doing the marathon? Oh, Meriwether's doing the marathon. I'm not sure if I'm big enough to read Meriwether. Oh, cool. I don't know, chat. Should I do it? Just for the hell of it? I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been watching one of streams. Anyway. I don't have really any special read messages or anything, just the usual ones. I guess I could come up with a new one. That said, I may eventually get new emotes and everything else, but that takes money, which I don't have. But yeah, let's... I'll figure another one. Does he have a limit? Oh, cool, he doesn't. I only have one person. Nope, 4? Cool. Copy the message. See you all there. Again, thank you for coming in. Hopefully, see you Sunday.